All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for coming to our Tuesday night Healthy Living lecture. My name is Tiffany, and I'll be your hostess, and I'm going to introduce you to two ladies that I'm a little bit nervous about having up here. These girls are a little wild, let me just tell you.
Come on down and join the party.
So tonight, we are talking about immunizations across the lifespan, so definitely a topic of public health and something evidence-based information that will be presented by our two presenters. We have Shelley and Leslie that will be speaking with you tonight. I'm just going to give you a little bit of background, and then we'll let them get started let the fun begin.
Let the show begin.
So Shelley and Leslie have cumulatively worked as public health nurses in Alaska for over 25 years, though they don't look a day over 25.
Over 29, that's what I say, 29.
Providing and supporting immunizations to individuals and communities in a variety of different settings. Shelley, with a BSN, now works as the maternal child health consultant for the state of Alaska of public health nursing, while Jenny, BAN, works out of the...
Well, Leslie.
So, oh my gosh, sorry.
That's
Leslie.
okay.
It's even written there.
We'll call you Jenny Leslie.
Yes. Works out of the Fairbanks Public Health Center and provides immunizations to clients across the lifespan while ensuring services to infants, children, and vulnerable populations. And Miss Laura over there is the nurse manager at Public Health, and she will moderate this panel if these girls get a little out of control. So help me welcome Shelley and Leslie.
Thank you. So we may seem like we're joking around. It's because we have known each other for a long time. I'm Shelley. This is Leslie. We would do our song and dance for you, but we will be in control. And yeah, we do have a good time, but let me tell you, when it comes to the topic of immunizations, it's a very, very serious topic for both of us. We both have spent a lot of time working in the field of immunizations. I myself, as the maternal child health nurse consultant for the state of Alaska, is very, very passionate about how I talk to parents, about how I educate people about the importance of immunizations. So immunizations is very broad. We could go down one road and talk about some things. We could go down another road and talk about other things. It's a topic that you see all the time. I read Facebook. I don't know how many of you read Facebook. And you always see these things in there that it catches my eye. I always have concerns, but I think, like Tiffany said, we're going to talk about evidence-based things, things that are scientific, things that have happened for centuries, and basically what vaccinations across the lifespan has done for everybody. And I promise I won't get too silly. So, our first slide talks about National Immunization Awareness Month. It is an annual observation held in August. Yo, it's August. And it highlights the importance of vaccination for people of all ages. The National Immunization Awareness Month was established to encourage people to make sure they are up to date on vaccines recommended for them. How many of you out here know whether you are or aren't up to date on your immunizations? I see a few hands. I am. I have to be in order to work as a nurse. Communities continue to use this month of August to raise awareness about the important role vaccines play in preventing serious and sometimes very, very deadly diseases. So like I said, this evening, both Leslie and I are going to talk about childhood vaccines, and Leslie will address those for adults. So immunizations are one of the top 10 public health accomplishments of the 20th century. Diseases that used to be common in this country, like polio, measles, whooping cough, mumps, tetanus, can now be prevented by vaccinations. These same germs still exist today, but because babies are protected by vaccines, we don't see these diseases nearly as often. However, most recently, and all over the country, within our own state, and within our own community of Fairbanks, we are seeing resurgences of pertussis. Last year we had measles in our community. And most recently, within the last couple of weeks, we have seen mumps again. These diseases affect all ages across the lifespan. The good news, however, something to think about, at least thanks to vaccines, diseases like smallpox no longer exist outside the laboratory. Over the years, vaccines have prevented countless cases of disease and have saved millions and millions of lives. Newborn babies have some disease immunity because of protection they receive from their mothers during pregnancy and when they are newly born. This immunity, however, decreases after the first few months of life. Through vaccination, children can develop immunity without suffering from the actual diseases that vaccines prevent. Infants are particularly vulnerable to infectious disease, which is why it is critical to protect them through immunization. Immunizations help prevent the spread of disease and protect infants and toddlers against dangerous complications. Today, we can protect children from 14 serious diseases through vaccination. Immunizations are not just for children, they are needed throughout our lifetime. Preteens and teens need vaccines too, and there are 4 vaccines recommended, which I'll discuss in a separate slide. While children should get a flu vaccine every year, these other vaccines for teens and preteens should be given when a child is between 11 to 12 years old. Teens may also need a booster vaccine that requires more than 1 dose to be fully protected. I don't know about you all, but I'm certainly at an age where when we saw measles or my cousin had measles, my mother would grab me and my sister and run us over to get exposed because they thought that is what we should do. Or chicken pox, Cousin Mike had chicken pox, so let's get him over there. And I hear these stories even today. Well, I took them over here. They are childhood diseases, except if your child is the one that has serious complications or has a horrible case because of chicken pox, which has taken over its body, or your child is the child that dies from complications of chicken pox, it's not so easy to say, I just wanted to take them over and get them exposed. So, how are immunization schedules determined and who makes these decisions? Leslie and I just look at a schedule, and there's schedules over there. We know what we need to get, but we don't make that decision. The ACIP, or the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, comprises medical and public health experts who develop recommendations on the use of vaccines in the civilian population of the United States. The recommendations stand as public health guidance for safe use of vaccines and related biological products. The ACIP was established under Section 222 of the Public Health Service Act and is governed by its charter. The ACIP includes 15 voting members responsible for making vaccine recommendations. The Secretary of the United States Department of Health and Human Services selects these members from following applications and nomination processes. 14 of the members have expertise in vaccinology, immunology, pediatrics, internal medicine, nursing, family medicine, virology, public health, infection diseases, and/or preventative medicine. And 1 member is a consumer representative who provides perspectives on the social and community aspects of vaccination. In addition to the 15 voting members, ACIP includes 8 ex officio members who represent other federal agencies with responsibility for immunization programs in the United States, and 30 non-voting representatives of liaison organizations that bring related immunization expertise. Next slide, please. So again, I look at all of you and I say, do you know if you're up to date? The diseases that vaccines prevent can be dangerous or even deadly. Vaccines reduce the risk of infection by working with the body's natural defenses to help it safely develop immunity to disease. When germs such as bacteria or viruses invade the body, they attack and they multiply. This invasion is called an infection, and the infection is what causes illnesses. The immune system then has to fight the infection. Once it fights off the infection, the body is left with a supply of cells that help recognize and fight that disease in the future. Vaccines help develop immunity by imitating an infection, but this imitation infection does not cause illnesses. It does, however, cause the immune system to develop the same response as it does to a real infection, so the body can recognize and fight the vaccine-preventable disease in the future. Sometimes after getting a vaccine, the imitation infection can cause minor symptoms like a sore arm or a fever, or sometimes symptoms like you feel like you got the flu, but it is not giving you the infection. Such minor symptoms are normal and should be expected as the body builds immunity. So now I'm going to talk about the immunization schedule for children, and I've kind of broken it down for you all in age categories. So infants and children need vaccines to protect them from harmful diseases. These diseases can have serious complications, especially for very young children, and even cause death. Hepatitis B is a serious disease caused by a virus that attacks the liver. The virus, which is called hepatitis B virus, or HBV, can cause lifelong infection, cirrhosis of the liver or scarring of the liver, liver cancer, liver failure, and death. And Leslie's going to touch a little bit more on that, on how it affects adults as well. Starting at 1 to 2 months of age, babies receive these vaccines to develop immunity from potentially harmful diseases. This schedule, which is up on top there, is approved by the American Academy of Pediatrics and the American Academy of Family Physicians, and is designed to protect infants and children by providing that immunity early in their life. Before they are exposed to life-threatening diseases, children are immunized starting at birth, and usually sometimes within hours, because they are susceptible to diseases at a young age, and the consequences of these diseases can be very serious and even life-threatening, especially for infants and young children. There are usually no immunizations that are scheduled between that 7 and 11 months of age. However, if a child has missed any earlier vaccinations, this is a really good time to play catch-up. By following the recommended schedule and fully immunizing children by 2 years of age, children should be protected against those 14 vaccine-preventable diseases. Between 12 and 23 months, children receive these following vaccines. Then, between ages 2 and 3 of age, children should be current on their immunizations except for yearly flu vaccination, or, again, if they are needing to catch up for any kind of missed immunizations. Between that age of 4 and 6 years, children receive those vaccines up on the screen to give booster doses, and often it completes a series. These vaccinations coincide with the start of school and kindergarten. Making sure that children of all ages receive all their vaccinations on time is one of the most important things that parents, grandparents like myself, caregivers, can do to ensure that children's long health is good, as well as the health of their friends, classmates, and everybody in the community. So as I mentioned a little earlier in the slide, there were those 4 vaccines that are recommended for preteens or teens. These vaccines help protect children, their friends, and their family members. While children should get a flu vaccine every year, the 3 other preteen vaccines should be given when children are between 11 to 12 years of age. They generally get 1 dose of MCV or meningococcal vaccine which helps protect against some of the bacteria that can cause meningococcal disease, including sepsis and meningitis. 3 doses of human papillomavirus, or we refer to as HPV, help to protect both girls and boys from HPV infection and cancers caused by that human papillomavirus. And then that booster of 1 dose of Tdap, which is tetanus, diphtheria, and acellular pertussis, that's recommended for protection against those antigens. So there are vaccine, preteens and teens will need more than 1 shot to get that best protection. The human papillomavirus, or the HPV vaccine, although I mentioned that it's recommended for that 11 to 12-year-old age, can be given as early as age 9 to help protect both girls and boys from infection and cancers that are caused by the human papillomavirus. And then a booster dose of that meningococcal conjugate is needed at age 16 to maintain protection against some of the bacteria that can cause meningococcal disease, including that sepsis and meningitis. Teens may also be vaccinated with a serogroup B meningococcal vaccine, which is fairly new, and that's usually 2 or 3 doses depending on which brand. It's preferably given at 16 through 18, but can also be given up through age 23. This has additional protection and is not in the original dose of the meningococcal vaccine. So as we talk about immunizations across the lifespan, it's also important to understand how we as a nation, as well as a state, is doing in providing protection for our children. The more our children are immunized, the better protected everyone will be. The national immunization surveys are conducted annually and used to obtain national, state, and selected local area estimates of vaccination coverage rates for the United States for children aged 19 to 35 months and for U.S. adolescents ages 13 to 17 years of age. The National Immunization Surveys are a group of phone surveys used to monitor vaccination coverage among children 19 to 35 months, teens 13 to 17, and flu vaccinations for children 6 months to 17 years. The surveys are sponsored and conducted by the National Center for Immunization and Respiratory Diseases of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Now that's a mouthful. And they're authorized by the Public Health Service Act. Data collection for the first survey began in April in 1994 to check vaccination coverage after a major measles outbreaks in the early 1990s. The National Immunization Surveys provide current household population-based state and local area estimates of vaccination coverage among children and teens using a standard survey methodology. The surveys collect data through telephone interviews with parents or guardians in all 50 states, the District of Columbia, and some U.S. territories. Landline and cell phone numbers are randomly selected and called to enroll 1 or more age-eligible child or teen from that household. The parents and guardians of eligible children are asked during the interview for the names of their children's vaccination providers and permission to contact them. With this permission, a questionnaire is mailed to each child's vaccination provider to collect the information on the types of vaccinations, number of doses, dates of administration, and other administrative data about the healthcare facility. Estimates of vaccination coverage are determined for the child and teen vaccination recommended by the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, or the ACIP, and children and teens are classified as being either up to date based on the ACIP recommended numbers or not. The important thing is all collected data that's used is for statistical purposes only, and no personal information is ever shared or released. So the next slide I'm going to share with you is just some data, and this represents new information. I just pulled it from the CDC National NIS, which has been published this month. It represents what children ages 19 to 35 months should be complete in. We call it the 4313314. That's a mouthful. And what it means is 4 diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis, 3 polio, 1 measles, mumps, rubella, 3 Hib, 3 Hep B, 1 varicella, and 4 pneumococcal. This data is taken directly from those NIS surveys that I just talked about. And so note that the U.S. national average right now is at 71.6%. Alaska as a whole is at 67.3%. And the Fairbanks Public Health Center, and realize that we do not see all children for immunizations. There are private providers out there. We don't know what their percentage rates are at this point in the game. But for us right now at the Public Health Center here in Fairbanks, the percentage is 64%. So the bottom line is just looking at the data, you can see that regardless, we still have a lot of work to do in getting our children fully immunized, and the hope is to be at 85, 90%, ideally would be 100%. So I am going to say thank you, and I am going to turn this over to Les, and she's going to talk about adult vaccines across the lifespan. Yeah.
Can I clarify one question? It was either yes or no. You were either perfect, you had everything, 431, or not.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So that's what they look at.
Right.
Does, between this age, do they have everything?
Right.
Remember I talked about those 14, all those preventable diseases. So it's quite the series, I tell you.
I can just add while Leslie gets ready.
Sure.
So it is a yes or no question.
Right.
So
Right.
we know that our immunization rates are not very high in that young population. And then what we find is by the time kids get between 5 and 6, our immunization rates go up to 90%, between 90 and 95, because they're required for school. So once there's a requirement and you have to do it for school, people get themselves caught up. But we worry about that time before age 5 when kids are most susceptible to vaccine preventable diseases, and we know we don't have a high enough immunization rate to really give them that herd immunity that protects the whole community.
Okay, so I'm Leslie. I work with Shelley and Laura at the Fairbanks Public Health Center, so I'm going to share some information with you on adult vaccines. And can you hear me?
Can you hear me now?
That's good? Okay. Just raise your hand if you can't hear me. So I guess the main message I want to say is that these infections are just a plane ride away. So please consider vaccinating yourself, your family, so we can protect our community. The first slide I have up is the State of Alaska Annual Infectious Disease Report, and it's for the interior region for 2014 and 15. And for hepatitis A, hepatitis B, mumps, and tetanus, you can see we haven't had any of those diseases the last couple of years. But pertussis, which is whooping cough, and pneumococcal invasive disease, and varicella, which is chickenpox, we've had some of those. And then the annual influenza report came out for 2015-16, and we had 376 cases in the interior. Pardon? One was for 2014 and one for 2015. Thank you for asking that. Okay, so we have 10 vaccines that are recommended for us to get. And certain types of vaccines are based on a person's age, our occupation, or our health conditions. Like if you have a history of asthma, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, which is COPD, diabetes, or heart disease. Vaccination is so important because it not only protects the person that's getting the shot, but it also helps prevent the spread of disease, and especially to those that are most vulnerable to serious complications, such as infants, young children, the elderly, and those with chronic conditioned and weakened immune systems. And you heard Shelley say and Laura that in order for us to have good herd immunity, we need individuals to get vaccinated. And so, think about protecting yourself, your family, and community. You're probably going to hear me say a few times that infections are just a plane ride away. And I'm going to go through some of the diseases. Can you hear me in the back? Okay, all right. So we're going to start with hepatitis A, and it's an infection that affects our liver. It's caused by the Hep A virus. And this is spread when a person ingests fecal matter from contact with objects, food, or drinks contaminated water by feces or stool from an infected person. Not everybody has symptoms from it. If symptoms do develop, there may be fever, vomiting, stomach pain, diarrhea, loss of appetite, joint pain, fatigue, jaundice, which is swelling yellowing of the skin or eyes, dark urine, or gray-colored stools. An infected person may have mild illness for a week or two, or may have severe illness where they need hospitalization. In 2014, there were approximately 2,500 cases of acute hepatitis A in the United States. Although any of us can get hepatitis A in the United States, certain groups of people are at higher risk, such as those who travel to or live in countries where hepatitis A is common, are men who have sexual contact with other men, use of illegal drugs, whether injected or not, having clotting factor disorders such as hemophilia, live with someone who has hepatitis A, or have oral anal sexual contact with someone who has hepatitis A. The best way to protect yourself is to vaccinate. So if you think you're at risk or someone you love is, please encourage them to talk to their provider about getting it. Hepatitis A vaccine is highly effective in preventing the infection. After you get the vaccine, protection starts in about 2 to 4 weeks, and a second injection results in long-term protection. Hepatitis B, that's another virus that can affect our liver. It's a blood-borne disease and can be very serious. It starts like a flu-like illness with loss of appetite, nausea, vomiting, rashes, joint pain, yellowing of the skin. And it stays in the liver for some people for the rest of their lives and can result in severe liver disease, including liver cancer. In 2014, there was approximately 25 new cases of hepatitis B in the U.S. And this vaccine is considered to be our first cancer-fighting vaccine. The second vaccine is the human papillomavirus. So, yay. Adults who are at risk for Hep B infection, such as healthcare workers, and adults who have certain chronic health conditions like diabetes, renal disease, chronic liver problems, HIV, or adults who are at risk for sexually transmitted diseases. They should get 3 doses of Hep B vaccine.
It's hard to hear you back there.
Okay, I'll move this up a little bit. How's that? Better?
Did you turn it on?
I did. Can you hear me? You check. Yeah, it's on.
Check, 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 check.
It's okay? You try a little closer. Maybe I better hold it.
I hear ringing in my ear. Just
I
talk
have a
like that.
soft voice. Unless I start goofing around with Shelley. Okay, how's that? I'll try to project a little bit better too. Let's see. The hepatitis B vaccine is very effective of preventing the infection. After receiving all 3 doses, the vaccine provides greater than 90% protection for children, infants, and adults before being exposed to the virus. And it does provide long-term protection, like hepatitis A vaccine. Okay, influenza. The single best way to prevent getting the flu is to get a flu vaccine. And it's a yearly vaccine that comes out, and it's recommended for everyone 6 months of age and older. Certain people are at higher risk for getting serious complications if they get the flu, including people over 65 and older, children younger than 5, but especially children younger than 2, pregnant women, and people with certain health conditions such as asthma, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease or COPD, diabetes, or heart disease, and people living in facilities like nursing homes or prisons. Annual flu vaccine is also important for anyone who lives with or cares for people that are at high risk for complications from getting the flu. The actual flu virus is fairly unpredictable, and how severe it is can vary widely from one season to the next, depending on many factors. Some of those factors are what flu viruses are spreading at which side of the world hemisphere, and how much flu vaccine is available, and how many people get vaccinated. And that all depends on how well the flu vaccine is actually working that season. I kind of heard it there a little bit. Sorry about that. Significant flu activity in Alaska can begin as early as June and as late as May. So it's really in our environment all year, but it typically peaks in February. And the reason we get it so early during our summer months and late spring is from our visitors from other countries. You know, on the buses and the cruise ships and the plane rides. It takes about 2 weeks after the flu vaccine for the antibodies to develop in your body for protection. And it's best to get vaccinated before the flu season starts, right around October, maybe the end of October. So that holds you through February when our peak season is. Okay. MMR. Measles, mumps, and rubella. Of these 3 diseases, measles is the most serious and the most contagious. From 2001 to 2013, the number of cases of measles ranged from 37 to 220, according to the CDC. In 2014, the U.S. had more than usual. They had 667 cases in 27 states. Most of the people got the measles after being exposed to someone who got the disease while they were in a different country. In 2015, last year, the U.S. had 189 cases stemming from an exposure at an amusement park in California, Disneyland. And as Shelley said, we've been touched by measles and mumps in our town over the last year. Okay, let's talk about pneumonia vaccines. So the CDC is recommending that adults get 2 different types of pneumonia vaccine, and they are called pneumococcal conjugate vaccine 13 and pneumococcal polysaccharide vaccine,
Try to say that 10
PPSV 23. So pneumococcal diseases can cause serious infections of the lung, which is pneumonia, or it can cause an infection that covers our brain or spinal cord, which is meningitis, or in our blood called bacteremia. Meningitis and bacteremia are considered invasive pneumococcal diseases, and what that invasive means, it can overwhelm our entire body. That pneumococcal 13 protects against 13 different types of approximately 90 types of pneumococcal bacteria, that can cause pneumococcal disease. PCV13 helps protect against invasive pneumococcal infections and pneumococcal pneumonia. And it's recommended for adults with certain medical conditions and all adults 65 years of age and older. So talk to your provider, if you should get one of these. The other pneumococcal type is the pneumonia 23, and that protects against 23 different types of pneumococcal bacteria. This vaccine also helps protect against the invasive types. It's recommended for adults who smoke cigarettes, have asthma, or at increased risk of disease. It's also recommended for all adults 65 years or older. Both vaccines cannot be given at the same visit. It's recommended to get your PCV13 first, and then it's up to your physician or pharmacist when you should get your second one, but it's typically recommended about a year after you get your 13, and then a year later you get your 23. Most pneumococcal deaths in the U.S., over 95%, are in adults. Yet about 67 million adults at increased risk remain unvaccinated, leaving them vulnerable. Vaccination is the safest, most effective way to reduce your risk of this severe disease. Each year in the U.S., about 520,000 adults 65 years of age and older get pneumococcal disease, and about 18,000 of them die from their illness. The majority of cases and deaths occur among adults 50 years and older, with the highest rates among those 65 and older. Almost everyone who gets invasive pneumococcal disease, the meningitis, or the bacteremia, usually needs hospitalization. So get your pneumonia vaccines. The next one I want to talk about is tetanus, diphtheria, and pertussis. And all adults should get our TD, our tetanus shot, every 10 years. We should also get a tetanus, diphtheria, and pertussis, which is whooping cough, if we haven't had one since we were a teenager. And it's especially important to get Tdap. That's the one with the whooping cough, the pertussis, if you have close contact with babies under age 1. Adults can get Tdap at any time, regardless of when your last tetanus was. It's also recommended for pregnant women during each pregnancy, and ideally in the 3rd trimester, the last 3 months of pregnancy, to help protect their newborns from whooping cough. It is safe to give during pregnancy at any time, but is recommended during the 3rd trimester to pass the most amount of protection to the baby. So all 3 of these diseases are bacterias. They're spread from person to person by coughing or sneezing. And tetanus enters the body through cuts and bruises, cuts, scratches, or wounds, like an open area on your skin. In the U.S., tetanus and diphtheria are uncommon. In Alaska, one of our greatest athletic events, the Iditarod, is in honor of the Great Serum Run to prevent the spread of diphtheria in Nome. So that's kind of cool. Let's see. Whooping cough, unfortunately, is very common. It's been on the rise in recent years. We've had more than 18,000 cases of whooping cough reported in 2015 in the U.S. While whooping cough can be serious for anyone, it's very serious and even deadly for our babies. Some people with whooping cough may just have a mild cough or what seems like a common cold. Some symptoms can vary. Adults may not know that they have it and end up spreading it to our babies or people that they are in close contact with. Both TD and Tdap vaccines work very well in protecting people from tetanus and diphtheria. The whooping cough part of the Tdap is effective, but it does not protect as well as we would like it to. So our scientists are working very hard on that right now to try to figure out what they can do to help prevent that disease. Even if you were vaccinated with these vaccines when you were little, please consider getting vaccinated again because it doesn't provide lifelong protection. That's why they want us to get boosters. And our last vaccine that I'll share with you is zoster or shingles. Shingles vaccine is recommended for adults age 60 years and older. Shingles is caused by the varicella zoster virus, the same virus that caused chickenpox. After a person recovers from chickenpox, the virus stays dormant in our body, but can reactivate later in life and cause shingles. Pain from shingles rash, called post-herpetic neuralgia, is the most common complication and can be very severe. Another complication occurs when the herpes zoster affects the eye or around the eye area, and that's called herpes zoster ophthalmicus. And that vaccine provides pretty good protection for us. Then I just wanted to share with you places that you could get vaccines here in Fairbanks. You can go to your provider, your doctor. Most doctors are giving vaccine in Fairbanks, and we do have a list of it up at the top by the front door of Lucas Vaccines. Also, most of our local pharmacists are giving vaccines, which is great for everybody. It's very handy. All of our urgent care centers, like Steece Immediate Care, Tana Valley First Care, and U.S. HealthWorks, formerly Urgent Care Center, and then at our Public Health Center.
And I
Okay.
just wanted to make a comment
Thank you.
about those local pharmacies. Most of them will cater to adults. Some of them do give child immunizations as well, but most of the time they like the children to be a little older, like 8 or 10, and they might give flu vaccine, and they have a lot of them. But most pharmacies do not like to give infants and little babies shots, so providers are the best place for that. So, okay.
Anybody have any questions?
Oh, good.
On your first slide, there was one that I don't know that you just covered. It started with V. I don't have my glasses.
Varicella?
Yeah, what is that?
That's chickenpox.
So it's the same thing as the Z one.
As the zoster
As-
vaccine?
No, there's 2 separate vaccines, one for varicella and one for zoster. One for chickenpox, one for shingles.
So the varicella vaccine is often the one that children get. They get a first dose at around age 1. They can't get it prior to age 1. And then they get a second dose between the ages of 4 to 6. They need to have those 2 doses in order to start school. And I don't know if any of you out in the audience has ever had shingles, but I personally have had shingles. And it is probably one of the most painful things that I have ever experienced. So I really encourage anybody who's of age to get the zoster vaccine to prevent that from happening, to really think about doing so.
Does it give you good immunity against it? Because I've heard that it only gives like 50% chance.
I think the numbers are a little higher.
Yeah, it's 51%, and about 67% for preventing that post-neuralgia rash and pain. But what the scientists are finding out is that even though it's got that mid-range protection, that if you get shingles, the length of disease will be shortened and the severity of it would be shortened. Yeah, good question.
chance for immunity, but if you do get the flu, it's usually not as severe.
Right, that same concept is it's not 100%. We all know it's not 100%. But what immunity you have hopefully will prevent you from going into the hospital, will, instead of keeping you out from work for 10 days, maybe 3 days, and it really decreases the severity of the infection.
Are the single shots and two-shot process a year apart?
Just one dose. It was the pneumonia vaccines that are a year apart.
So for years they've been talking about the eradication of polio and the hope that it was going to be eradicated, would have been done by now. So in the United States, we don't see live disease. We don't see that. And past polio used to come from live vaccination. But there are third world countries that are still battling polio. So the threat is still out there. Like Les says, it's an airplane ride away for so many of these infectious diseases. And so, yes, it would be nice, like smallpox, to not have to vaccinate our children or whatever. But the reality is, until it is totally eradicated from the world, we are always at risk. Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There was an interesting article, I'm just trying to think of where it was this week, about polio and the eradication of
Yes.
polio. It was on like Google News, but I can't remember what the actual source was. But it's in Afghanistan now, and I think Pakistan. It's been narrowed down to little enclaves in those two countries. And so they're really thinking that they're getting close to complete eradication. And it's to the point where there's now recommendations to like start destroying some of the polio that exists in laboratories. And of course, laboratories never really like getting rid of things that they've had for a long time. So there's resistance to that at this point. But it's amazing that we're really getting that close, like with smallpox, which is now, been designated eradicated. That's just those two countries. And that's been such a worldwide public health effort. And if any of you are Rotarians, for sure, I'd like to say thank you, because Rotary
Right.
has specifically done such great work internationally around the eradication of polio. So hopefully within our lifespans, we'll actually see it be eradicated.
Yeah, I'm hoping so. I attended an immunization conference at the CDC in Georgia probably about 15 years or even 20, a while ago. But I remember Dr. Atkinson, who's very an immunization guru as far as I'm concerned, and just very, very well voiced, talking about it back then, and it was only going to be 5 years, and that was 15 years ago. So it takes time for these eradications to happen. But like Laura said, it's getting smaller and smaller, and I sure hope in my lifetime I see that it's eradicated. So you had a question.
Two questions. These immunization schedules are available on one of these websites or multiple, both the children and adults?
Yes.
Yes.
cdc.gov, and you plunk in immunizations, and it'll take you right to where you want to go. There's adult, there's teens, not teens, there's adults, there's children, there's catch-up schedules. I think you brought some schedules here, so we even have both adult and children and teen schedules that we brought with us this evening if you want to take some home with you.
And the other question is, I don't know how it stands now, but many decades ago, before you could go to university, you had to have a tuberculosis test.
I'll let you address
So
that.
what's the status on that now? Because I know in some places it's reemerging, specifically in the state of Alaska.
Or it never goes away.
It never goes away. It's still required here at the University of Alaska. Yeah.
You touched briefly, you alluded to the herd protection or whatever, and I was wondering if Alaska's doing okay or actually not particularly exemplary in terms of doing a good job of its vaccination, good enough You know,
Yep, we know what you mean.
Yeah.
Well, probably depends on who you ask. I think, the CDC, Center for Disease Control, would like all states to be at 90% coverage. And locally, just in our clinic, we're at 64. What we don't have is like a mapping of all the clinics and pharmacies in town to really tell what our protection is. So I'm not too sure how to answer that.
Well, and a lot of it depends on the age group, because that's why
Yeah.
we research carefully that like 3-year-old age group, because that kind of gives you a good marker. And at that 3-year-old age group in Alaska, we're not anywhere close to having herd immunity. We're at about 67%. You really need to be over 90. But within our school age population,
We are.
because it's a vaccine requirement to
Right.
be in school unless you have a medical waiver for it, we're at over 90%. So once you get to that older population, and your immunity for those diseases once you're in school are, for the most part, going to last the rest of your life, with the exception of Tdap and some things where you need boosters. So as we get into our older population, we do have that herd immunity. But for our young ones, we really don't. And we really see that, like, we did have a case of measles, we have had a case of mumps. And when those infections come into the community, like the section of epidemiology, public health, the hospital, we really jump on that and do really thorough contact investigations. And part of that contact investigation is to find out who potentially was exposed, and then what is their immune history. So we'll find out, have they had immunizations to that infection for like measles or mumps? If so, we get the documentation of it, or people will have blood drawn to see if they have immunity maybe from a natural infection that they had when they were young. And in the cases we've had pretty good immunization status and immune history. And you've noticed those diseases haven't spread. They're kind of a flash in the pan, and then no one thinks about it again. And that's a really positive thing for public health, because, general, our public's health, because it means we have that herd immunity, and we're able to jump right on it and have people isolate themselves who might be infectious, and so it hasn't spread like it could. But if some of those infections would end up like in a child care center where you had a lot of young kiddos, you could have a very
really
different experience. So in some ways, we feel like we've been lucky in a sense of where people have been exposed or who they've exposed themselves to, because the scenario could be very different. And that's what we saw in the situation that happened with measles down in Disneyland, where you were with a much younger population, or there's been cases in the rest of the United States that have come into people who have a lot of vaccine hesitancy or don't vaccinate, and those infections have just run rampant really fast. So it's kind of a mixed answer, but a lot of it depends on age.
Yeah, thank you.
a direct follow-on, it's useful. Understood exactly what you said, and I appreciate that. Hoping that the limited funding status of the state government now won't necessarily affect public health such that the searching out these things, it takes some money once you run into a problem to immediately jump on it. It's not going to be done federally, it's going to be done by state. I'm hoping that the response is still adequate there because it's taken seriously.
Absolutely.
We have been lucky, but we have been lucky to a degree that it hasn't ended up on the far side of the scale. But if we don't respond, then
That is our number one priority, to respond to these. They're supportive of that.
There's a question.
Can't see, too short. There we go. I see you.
Where do I find these statistics on how much protection is provided with all of these vaccines?
For children, for anybody.
Children, mostly.
Probably for both.
For both, for any of them. The CDC, again, the
Center for
CDC
Disease
Control, it talks about everything. They don't hide things. They say it the way it is. And you can, again, CDC, www.cdc.gov, plunk in, search for immunizations, children's, they break it down. They talk about each and every vaccine. and it can gives you the information that you are looking for.
Like talk about how many people they interviewed.
Through the NIS, through the National Immunization Survey, yeah. It actually has a whole section on NIS, tells you what they do, it gives you the questions they ask people. It really breaks everything down for you.
Just to add to that too, the CDC is really good about, on their website, they're really good about citing the studies.
Mhm.
Where they come from, that sort of thing. So it's really easy to find sources.
Navigate.
And the ACIP, so the place where the recommendations come from, again, that's a whole separate section within the immunizations on the CDC. So you can find anything you're looking for.
And a couple things to follow up with that too, if you're interested in childhood immunizations, one of my favorite resources is the Children's Hospital of
Yes,
Philadelphia.
CHOP.
Yeah, so it's CHOP, which is pretty easy to remember,
Mhm.
.edu.
That's right.
And they have you could sit there and read from probably here to the end of your life about immunizations. But so much of it is really broken down so you can find specifically what you're looking for, and then all the research and sightings, and then kind of in plain English too what it means. So that's a really
And
nice
another one is the Immunization Action Coalition. And so that's another one that you can look up, and it talks about all the different sites and talks about all the different vaccines, effectiveness, side effects, everything and anything that you can think about.
And you can also call us at
I was just going to say, or we've got cards out there. Feel free to call us as well.
all the time.
We can-
People ask specific questions, and we have all kinds of resources that we can dial in to find it. We can even, each vaccine comes with
Inserts.
a package insert, which gives like so much information about what
We
they
don't
did
even
to say that it was safe, how effective it is after the first dose versus the second dose, and all of that. And if you want, we'll get into that with you. But it's helpful to kind of dialogue, because if you just sit there and read it yourself, you might get more than you ever want. Yeah, feel free to use this.
I got one question. Because I've had several people come to me, is there a website where a person can get a large wall poster as far as, well, gee, I want to travel to such and such. What are the recommended shots for that country?
Again, the CDC.gov
CDC
has
Yeah.
all the travel. I used to do travel immunizations at the health center years ago, and I would find out where people were going, and I would get on the travel site so I knew exactly what people needed. So that is the best place to get updated current information.
They have a poster. So
You plunk in where you're traveling to, and they tell you what's recommended or tell you what you actually have to have in order to enter the country. But yeah.
Some of the vaccine, you might not have a poster because it changes so often. So, not yet.
Not yet. They're working
They're
on
working
it.
on it.
They are working on it, yeah. Just like they're working on an HIV vaccine. I mean, they really are trying to work on as much as they possibly can with what they know.
Did you have a question back?
Question on influenza A. Why is it typically a seasonal affliction, and why can't the immunization knock it out once and for all without having to get re-immunized every fall? And I have a follow-up question after this.
Okay. Well, influenza travels across the world from east to west. So 6 months ago, it was across the world. And so the scientists are beginning to make the vaccine what hit them over in Asia for our fall. So, and those just travel around the world, and it changes all the time. So that's why they have to make a new one every fall, or summertime, actually.
So
And I forgot your second question.
Well, it's respiratory in its symptoms, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, does it mimic congestive heart failure? Is there ever a misdiagnosis for congestive heart failure, which also can cause congestion of the lungs?
I'm a registered nurse. I'm not a doctor.
You've never been asked
Um,
that question.
I haven't. That's a good one. Congestive heart failure has a myriad of symptoms, and a few of those, like shortness of breath, blood pressure dropping.
Fluid buildup
You
in the
could
lungs.
fluid buildup. If someone has the flu, I mean that could happen too. But I think there's
It can
Poss-
mimic many things. It
It
could be
can.
pneumonia.
A cold.
It could be a myriad of different things. To say that, what we recommend is, if you are not well and you're not getting better, you really do need to see your provider and
yeah, it
make
kinda
sure it
depends on the
isn't-
person too, what
Yeah.
their system is like and how well they are.
And the good thing about flu is there is a laboratory test
Right.
to find out
Yeah.
if you have flu and if so, what strain. And so if you're having symptoms where it's like, yeah, it could be a few different things, it's really important to have your provider
flu-like.
actually
It could
test.
just be
to find
flu-like
out what
symptoms
Yeah.
too that don't
And
come
that's
up
why
positive for
the
flu.
rates that Leslie provided to us, those are the cases that
Are
actually
confirmed.
get diagnosed at the lab. But we know that a lot of people, they
Yeah.
get sick and they just stay home and they say, I had the flu. And sure, they probably did have the flu, but it's not lab confirmed. And not everyone really needs to be tested. But when you see those rates of like there were this many people that had flu, it's important to remember that's how many lab tests were sent in and confirmed. It doesn't tell you how many people in your community actually had the flu or had something. And flu strains mutate and change all the time. It's like the common cold. There's so many different kinds of the common cold. It's always shifting. And same with flu. And so there's always new need for vaccine because of shifts in virus and the different strains that are out there.
And what's coming out in the fall is what we know was present last year. So if by the time the companies have made the flu vaccine based on what we know, and this new strain comes from here to here and is not in this year's flu vaccine, then you're not going to be protected. And when people say, I got the flu anyways, it's not because the flu didn't work. It protected you against what we knew. We had no control over the new strain, like Laura said, that came over and happened to hit at the same time, flu vaccine just came out.
Probably heard that in the news. When it works and when it doesn't.
Yeah. But it's still your best protection.
I just had a question. As a guy of a certain age, I had chickenpox and I had measles.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't have mumps, and all of a sudden we're still around. So what's the recommendation there for us users?
Well, our scientists say if you were born 1957 or earlier, that you should have immunity. If you think that you haven't had it or been exposed to it as a child, I would have your doctor have a blood test and check for a titer to see if you are immune to it.
I'm way before 57, but I'm sure
Yeah.
I've never had mumps.
Yeah, I would probably do a titer.
Okay.
Yeah. Have you had MMR vaccine?
Not that I know of.
Okay. Just measles vaccine or?
Or the measles.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, like I've had measles, mumps, and rubella, and 2 vaccines. So
Me too.
hopefully I'm covered.
Anyways, it has really been a real pleasure for us to come and speak with you.
Thank you.